welcome once again. I am Jason from the Truth Behind the Magic podcast. I am by myself again for this video, as I was with the last video. Blaze will not be in this one because, simply put, he really doesn't have experience doing bell services, so kind of just made sense for me to fly solo for these videos, but most likely you were coming from the first part of this two-part series. Well, at this point it's two parts, you never know, it could end up being more. And I decided to make this video because I realized pretty much immediately after finishing making the last one that there were things that I forgot to say. It's funny how that works, that pretty much immediately after you stop doing something, stop filming something, you're like, oh, here's another piece of information. So I kind of looked into what I kind of left out, not necessarily left out, but things I just didn't really remember to say. The first part, I would say it was pretty complete. Like, if anyone only sees that one, they're still going to get a very good overview of what the role is like, especially with transfers. I talked about that for a long time because it's something I know well, and I think it's probably the biggest question mark for most people coming into this role. But I compiled kind of other thoughts I had about this, and I was like, this actually constitutes enough to make a second part to this video. Something that's really big that I can't believe I forgot in the last video is that some people are probably wondering, are we tipped in this role? What's the pay scale like? How does that work? So, as far as pay is concerned, it's just going to be the standard college program rate, $14, $15, whatever it may be in the future if you're seeing this then. On my first program, I only got paid $11, so what they're paying them now is actually, like, a ton compared to that, but, in inflation, it probably feels like less, honestly, though. Simply put, this is a non-tipped role. None of the CP roles are tipped. I'm not really sure why that is. I don't know if it's just an extra hassle to allow roles that are tipped. I don't know if there's more regulation that has to go into that or something, but you do wear the same costume as regular bell people, though. So it can make for some interesting situations. You are almost certainly going to get tipped at some point throughout your program. Like, I mean, I was at least a dozen times over just 3 months, probably more than that. But yeah, you wear the same costume as the bell people, and you do oftentimes stuff that they are doing as well, handling people's bags, bringing them out their luggage, that sort of thing. So people just assume you were supposed to get tipped. So in the event that you are tipped, I know some people are going to say I should just keep this, and some people probably will, because I know how people are. But what you should do is give it to a bellman, you know, if you have a bellman that you really like. I mean, not that I'm necessarily saying you should play favorites on the job, because that leads to people being ostracized and whatnot. But no, if you have a bellman that you really like and they're working that day, give it to them. If you notice that a lot of bellmen are being given tips and you see someone that hasn't been given a tip from another cast member like you could give it to them. But yeah, at the end of the day, just, if you get tipped, don't worry about it. Hand it over to a bellman and you're scot-free and nothing's going to happen to you negative. I mean, you can't help it if you get tipped. I actually got tipped once in quick service. I think it was like $2 or something like that just for handing someone a plate, but I immediately took it to a leader because it was not worth losing my job over $2, that's for sure. Sorry, I'm saying a lot. I can't seem to get over that lately. Another thing that I didn't really talk about in the last video, I think I talked about it a tiny bit. I mentioned it in some scenarios, but what kind of hours are you typically going to be working on this role? And I would say just for resort roles in general, you are usually looking at closing shifts. I mean, CPs in general, it's also known as a closing person. I'm sure you may have heard that before if you've been looking at a lot of videos. But yeah, CP, closing person, pretty much true. In some cases, sometimes rare, you will be opening most of your shifts. I've seen people that have programs like that, but that's not common. That's really only for certain roles, I would say, certain situations. In fact, at my location, there were 2 people that were full-time that actually liked to close. So usually it would end up only being 1 CP that was closing with one of those people. Sometimes it would end up being 2 CPs that were closing. There were only, like, at most 5 CPs there. I think it was 5, including me. It's very small in Bell Services, especially at my resort, which once again was Coronado Springs. I know I mentioned that in part 1, but in case you got here and haven't seen that video, I would suggest you go watch it. But yeah, resorts in general kind of got derailed from that. I apologize, but resorts in general, you're looking at late shifts, like later than a park. The only situation in a park where you're going to see later shifts than the resorts for closing is if you're Magic Kingdom and you're working parties, which that's kind of its own separate deal. Blaze, he worked at Magic Kingdom quick service. We will talk about that a lot later on, but he knew about working those parties. He would sometimes not get back till 3 or 4 a.m. But in my case, I've luckily not had to deal with that. I did have to work some parties at Hollywood Studios, where people would rent out the park after closing, but those you usually only work till like midnight, so it kind of just felt like a resort shift anyway. But the most common shift for closing at Coronado, and I'm sure it's similar to this everywhere else, they may vary a little bit, but you were looking at 3:30 p.m. to midnight. And the other person that was there, which obviously could be you in a different situation, worked 3:45 to 12:15, but still roughly the same thing. Those were the 2 closers. And I will talk a little bit later about the actual opening and closing procedures in Bell Services, because compared to what I've done in the company before, it was nothing, especially compared to quick service, but I will go into way more detail about that shortly. The other shift that we saw a lot was 1:30 to 10 p.m., and that shift, if you came in, you immediately would go to the specific desk. It was in the old luggage room, the grocery area, or not the old luggage room, the old Bell Services room, where the main desk used to be. It was the grocery room now. So if you came at that time, you would go in there, and you were by yourself in there most of the time, unless someone else went in there with you, which when I would do a transfer shift, I would go into that room after, just because there were already 3 or 4 dispatchers at the main desk, way too many people out there. No reason not to have 2 people out in the grocery room at that point when you're an extra person. And it helps the other person in there because they have someone to talk to instead of just standing there at a computer for 8.5 hours. Well, 7.5, but to mention transfers, that shift was 11:30 to 8 p.m. 11:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. obviously. Wasn't a 24-hour shift. That one, you would just come in. I know I described that in detail in the previous section of this, but yeah, you just come in, start your transfer shift immediately, and when you're done, you're just an extra person. And that brings me to a point that Bell Services is kind of unusual from roles that I've seen, because when you clock in most roles, both the roles I did previous to this, you clock in, you hit get assignment, and you get like a ticket, CDS ticket, which CDS, I might do a deeper video on that, but it tells you where to go. It gives you an assignment and tells you what position you need to go to. Bell Services is not like that, at least at my location, but I don't see why it would be different anywhere else. You clock in, where you go depends on when you were starting your shift. So 3:30, you know you're going out to the main desk. 3:45, you know you're going out to the main desk and you're a closer. 1:30, as I mentioned, was going out to the other room. 11:30 was transfers, and this is going to be like that at every resort. It won't always be the same time, and of course other resorts don't have a specific grocery room for that, but transfers, they'll have a set time where you know this is the transfer shift, and if you come in during this time, that's what you're doing. Things like the shuttle driver at Animal Kingdom, Pargo driver at Grand Floridian, I'd imagine those are the same way, where if you get this on your schedule, you know what you're doing that day. As far as opening shifts, I never worked them. I think the earliest shift I had was 10 a.m., and that was a normal shift. It was the only shift I had the whole program that was not 8.5 hours. Towards the end, they started to give some people some 6.5 hour shifts and things like that. It was 10 to 4:30, which I'm fine with that. As long as it is not the crack of dawn, I like that. I would much rather close or work a midday shift than opening. Midday shifts are very rare in the college program. That's kind of digressing off subject, but very rare to work a non-opening or non-closing as a CP. In bell services, those opening shifts can be pretty early. 6:30 to 3, that was a really common one. 7 to 3:30, that was another, potentially even earlier. If you're a trainer, you'll have to get up really early, I know that, which you probably won't become a trainer on your program, but if you stay there a year, you might. One of my trainers was technically a CP, even though she lives down there full-time, and she actually left her CP recently and went to quick service. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you work opening and bell service, or really any role, you're going to have to be getting up pretty early, but especially in the resort roles, you have to get up early. Something else I mentioned in the last video, but I realized I didn't explain it very well, was the luggage room. What is a luggage room? What goes on in there? What does it look like? So I guess it's pretty obvious that it's where you store the luggage. They can definitely vary from resort to resort. I know I said in the last one that Coronado, we had like the nicest, one of the newest luggage rooms on property. Massive. The racks were really nice. Nothing was falling down. But yeah, the luggage room, you basically just walk in, and it's, I guess you could almost say like a mini warehouse where you just have shelves along shelves, just mini shelves of where you store people's luggage. And what we had a number and letter system where in our resort we had 4 shelves. Some of them have 3. But it was A, B, C, and D. We rarely ever stored anything on the top, which was the D row, because it was way up there, and I'm sure someone could actually get injured if they were not properly getting stuff off that row. We mainly used B and C unless it was just insanely busy. But say like it was on rack 64 and it was on C, which would be the next to the top, that would be 64C, and that's how you'd log it. You would do 64C, you'd have the guest name, and I actually have some show and tell for this episode. This is a luggage tag. I don't know if it'll be backwards on your screen. I don't think so, but this is the kind of tag you will put on the actual luggage. The only reason I even have this is I'm sure I had it in my side pocket and just accidentally brought it home. I have a few of them, but I guess this technically isn't the tag. This is what they bring back to you, and they'll say, we want this, we need this luggage back, and they give you this. But it's the same exact thing as the tag. It just doesn't have a strap on it for you to like connect it to the luggage. This one, as you can see, their last name was Austin. It's a check-in, that's CI, and it was 3 pieces. And what you do if you log it, I don't know if it's quite this way at every resort, but it's probably very similar. You would take this LG number, and the last 4 digits you would write down somewhere on the luggage storage sheet, and you would also take a barcode. Usually below this there's a long like string of barcodes that you remove when you give them this, obviously, but you would take one of those, put it next to the name, the log on the luggage storage log, and that's how you would do it for storage. And when they come back later, they hand this to you. You go back there, you find the name on the sheet. If there's people with multiple names, you'll know it from the LG number. Just the same thing on this one, but it's checkout CO. I know when I pointed at that right there, I did not even point anywhere near it. I wasn't looking at the screen. I don't know what I pointed at on the front of that, but yeah, luggage storage is very easy, and going and grabbing the luggage is very easy. You can get some really heavy luggage in this roll, which if you really don't want to lift a lot, that can be a problem, but This kind of brings me to my next point, which is just kind of some more details on things you will be doing. I know I went over some of this last time, but I'm going to go into more detail here. As far as storing luggage, that's when you're going to be handling luggage the most. Transfers, you do have to handle it. Loading that van, as I said last video, it can be a task, especially if you're a smaller person. It wasn't really a problem for me because I've done stonemasonry before. I've done some more kind of manual labor stuff, but some people might really hate transfers. Most people did that I knew. But anyway, when you're storing people's luggage, there's really a couple kind of guests that you're typically going to be dealing with. Most of them are either people who have arrived to check in, but they're too early. Some of them are like way too early. I mean, 6-8 hours earlier than when they're allowed to check in. Sometimes the resort will allow them to go to their room, but oftentimes they're not allowed to yet, so they will bring their bags to you to store those until they can come back later and actually take them to their room, or they'll call down from the room and have you send them up with a bellman. Typically, those are people that want to go to, like, Disney Springs or something like that, but they can't take their bags with them, so they will check them there. I've actually seen people walking into Disney Springs with their full luggage, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I know you probably left your resort earlier and checked out, but, like, why are you bringing this to Disney Springs? That does not look fun at all. You will also see people who checked out, pretty much referencing what I just said. You'll get people walking up to the desk who checked out, but they still have another park day or something like that planned. And we will actually allow people to store their bags there even if they checked out. You'll typically see those people come in late at night after a park day, after Disney Springs, and they'll finally pick it back up and usually take like a Mir shuttle or something like that to the airport. Pretty much the next thing I have to talk about is, sorry, I'm messing with my notes here. They got a little messed up here. Just some more information on what you're going to be doing when you're on the computer. How does hot sauce work, which that's the hotel service system, which I was talking about on the last video. So when you come in, like I said, you'll log into your computer, log into hot sauce on the hub, log into a couple other things, but when someone calls down, typically, well, what you'll be dealing with, if you're working a morning shift, you're going to be getting people calling to check out, because they have to check out by 10 or 11 p.m., or sorry, 10 or 11 a.m., so you'll be dealing with a lot of checkouts. So they'll call down, they'll say, I'm checking out, and I need my luggage taken down to the lobby or wherever else. You'll get on the computer system, you'll put in a work order that is it's just called checkout. You will take the guest name, the number of bags, and if they have people riding down to the lobby with the bellman, number of guests. We could only do 5 because that's what we could fit on a cart. And then you'll put the order through, you'll look at the list of bellmen that are available, assign a bellman to it, and then there you go. They'll do it when they can. Check-in is the same thing. If you're working at night, you'll be getting check-ins, especially after that, like, 4 p.m. It gets hectic there from probably about 4 to 7 p.m., I'd say. Same process. There's a slight difference, which I'll talk about here in a second, but you just look up check-in, and the difference here is there's 2 kinds of check-in. We had check-in luggage only and check-in with guests. If it was luggage only, the bellman would just either get the luggage from the main lobby or go back where we had it stored. If someone was calling down, they had stored it earlier and they wanted it brought up, they would take the luggage, take it to the room. If it was a check-in with guests, we would put the number of guests, still the same thing, room number, name, that sort of thing, but we put numbers of guests as well, because we need to know if it's more than 5 people, because they can't take them on one cart. And they would take those guests to their room on the golf cart, which that's pretty much the only time we really, I shouldn't say accepted golf cart rides, but that was the time it was acceptable, because it was within the range of the bellman's duty. It wasn't like someone was just asking for a golf cart ride. They had luggage, they were checking in, and it was a tipped opportunity, what we would call a tip opportunity for a bellman. So it was considered very different from someone just asking for a golf cart ride. The next thing I want to talk about is kind of just like a day in the life of someone in this role. What is your day going to look like? So of course you'll show up to work, clock in. As I said earlier, you don't have to get an assignment. You can just, you know where you're going based off your shift. I only had one time where I thought I was going to be working in one position, but they told me that it was actually somewhere else. They had scheduled 2 people for that time. That was the day I had to work down in the parking lot, literally telling people not to drive against a bus lane. I mean, I don't know why you'd go down a street that says one way only, but that's a completely different story. So yeah, you'll clock in, go to your spot, you'll work there for, typically there's a sequence of how people take breaks based on when you came in. Sometimes you can ask to take it earlier or later. I preferred to have it later. If it was 6 hours into a shift, I didn't care. I would just work 6 hours up to a break. One girl that I knew, she liked to work like 2 hours and then take a break, which I think is horrible because you have 5.5 hours after your break that you have to just do the same thing. But yeah, you get an hour break in most situations. It could be slightly different at different resorts, and of course, if you're working a shorter shift, you're not going to get a full hour. But at Coronado, it was enough time to go back to Flamingo. There are a few resorts, maybe over at Riverside, that area, where I probably wouldn't chance going back to Flamingo for lunch. I never did just because I didn't even eat on break. I'm not a person that eats at work. I don't know why. I just never have been. I eat before, eat after, that sort of thing. But you definitely have enough time if you would like to go back to Flamingo. It's only it's less than a 10-minute drive to Coronado. It was a very prime location to work at. You're also just right down the street from the Disney McDonald's. So if you wanted to go there, you could. But yeah, just pretty much just your standard break. After that, you work the rest of the time, of course. And if you're closing, in a second, I'll go over the opening and closing procedures, at least what I can remember. But yeah, you just finish out your shift and you're good to go. Opening and closing, there was nothing to it. After doing quick service, my first program, that was wild. I never had an opening shift. Actually, I had one opening shift in quick service, and it wasn't even at my main location. It was when I was deployed, which I'll talk about that in a later video. But closing in quick service was crazy, especially at my location at Port Orleans Riverside. Some days, if it was really busy and you were on like the worst task, the worst position possible, it could take you up to 2 hours after you were supposed to clock out to actually clock out. I think the latest I ever left there was 1:30 or maybe even 2 a.m., which I was supposed to leave at 11:30, but that place was crazy. So even going into attractions after that, I couldn't believe how simple it was to close, but this I think was even easier than that. There was maybe this was a little more involved than attractions, I would say, but you didn't have to deal with as many people at the end of the night in this than you do in attractions. But opening, you pretty much just literally got a few pieces of paper from a file that you needed, walked up to the desk, and just open. That was pretty much opening in this role. The grocery room, the second bell services room, didn't open till 1:30 when that person came in. Sometimes someone would open it early if there was like an extra person there and they just wanted to go in there, but you didn't have to. The person that was in that room would close at 10 or maybe even 9:30. They would close when they left. And that room would just get locked up from the outside. No one could even come in. Closing transfers, you didn't really have closing. It was just like I've said a few times, when you're done with your transfers on that shift, you're just done, basically. You just help other people. Might even be able to get an ER, depending on what happens, but typically you have to break other people, so you can't really get an ER most of the time with that. But, yeah, closing, you just had a few pieces of paper that you had to fill out, make sure everything, the grocery log was up to date, make sure you logged the luggage that was still in the back, which was usually only just a few pieces of, like, overnight guest luggage if people were staying a long time and had some of it down there. That was pretty much it. You just logged a few things, and then you took like 2 signs off the desk that said bell services, and you walked into the back and told the leaders you were done, basically. You had to tell, like, the overnight bell person a couple things and give them those pieces of paper, but that was just about it. Very simple. You could get it all done before the actual closing time, because you hardly deal with anyone at the end of the night unless it's a very strange situation. So with 2 of us there, one of us would just go to the back and complete the closing while the other person did the rest of the night in the actual job. Transfers, I know I talked in depth about that in the last video, but I'll kind of just go through the day in the life of that as well. You show up, clock in, went to the leader's office. We had something called a key locker, which that's where you would scan your blue ID. You have to get permissions for all of this, of course, but you scan your blue ID, open it up, get your key out for your specific vehicle. I can't remember the number of ours. I can almost remember it, but it was 12 something, I think. But there's like a tag on the key that tells you which vehicle it is. Went outside, got the vehicle. At our resort, it was actually pretty far away from the office, because Coronado's so big. Sometimes it's right beside it, but walk down to the parking lot. Sorry, just hit my keyboard there. Walk down to the parking lot, get your vehicle. At a lot of resorts, you'll drive it up front. You pretty much drive it to wherever other resorts are doing transfers to you from, where you go to load your own luggage. At Coronado, it's kind of a strange place. It's probably a bit confusing for people that have to transfer to Coronado, but it's like behind the tower, sort of beside it, I guess, not even really behind it, but you had to drive up a cast member only road, pull up. I'd park the van there as close as possible, open up the side and back doors, load in all the bags, which actually I have one more piece of show and tell for this episode, which is related to this. I know I mentioned having the piece of paper in the last video that I would write all the transfers down on, which that's something I kind of missed. Before loading the van and getting your keys, triple, quadruple check that all the transfers are correct and go ahead and write them on this. This is a stack of all the ones I kept. I'm pretty sure I have every single day I did transfers on here. And this is what we called a guarantee card. Or actually, this one might be slightly different, but it's pretty much the same thing. And I would just fill out the person's name, where they were going, how many bags it was, and this is after I took it to the resort. I would put where I left it at the resort, which, as you can see, as I was saying earlier, 24C, that would be rack 24, row C. A few resorts, I think Contemporary was one of them, they didn't have ABC, they had top, middle, bottom, but it's pretty much the same thing. As you can see, a couple of these, I know I mentioned sometimes you just have to leave it where you can. That is where I had to leave it on a cart. I didn't even have a shelf for it, which that's sometimes fine. And as you can see here, this one literally just says cart. It doesn't even say cart and then a number, because some of them are numbered, some of them are not. But yeah, I believe this was actually the day where it was like 25 or 26 transfers and 175, something like that, bags, and it went all the way down the front. Stuff on the back as well. I would check off when I went to a resort, which that's another thing. Have a good layout of which resort you're going to first. This one, I don't know if I had it exactly in order. Let me see if I have another example here. I didn't always write it on them, but I like to go to the Magic Kingdom area resorts last. This one's good. This one shows what my typical rotation was. I would go to Animal Kingdom area first, or the All-Stars. Well, they're technically a part of that, but then I would go to things like Boardwalk, Yacht and Beach Club, which these were orange tags, these were blue, these two were yellow. Red isn't on here, but there was red and green. Green was what was on green? I honestly cannot remember. It was like there's a pink one as well, I just remembered, but I cannot remember what was on the green one. It doesn't matter. There's like 5 resorts on each of them, and they're color coded. Some of them have, like, Bay Lake Tower has its own luggage room. The Grand Floridian, the actual DVC part of it, has its own luggage room, so you have to mark that specifically on the transfer tag. But yeah, like I said, figure out a rotation. I like to start close, and I liked ending, especially at the Grand. I just liked ending. I like ending in the Magic Kingdom area. I don't know why. It is the most magical area on property. Something about the Grand, especially, I love just taking luggage there and just leaving and being done for the day, basically. It was awesome. So yeah, that's pretty much it for transfers. After you get back, like I've said a few times, you assist other people. When someone goes on break, you'll usually take their position, which can be at the main desk or out in the secondary luggage room in our case. But yeah, that's pretty much it for a day in the life of doing transfers. The last thing I want to talk about here is kind of some more clarification. I cannot speak. I apologize. Some further clarification of something I said in the last video, which was being at the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak, in kind of the resort main lobby echelon segment. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Like I said, in our case, I think we kind of felt like we were looked to last as far as priority-wise. Concierge and front desk kind of got more priority. People that wanted to cross-train, it was difficult to do that out of bell services. Sometimes a bellman would cross-train for dispatch or vice versa, but you couldn't really cross-train into concierge. There's an extended training that you have to do for that. It's like 3 weeks or a month long or something like that, but it's not necessarily a bad thing being at the bottom of the totem pole, because, and I know if people who are front desk concierge see this video, they're going to be pissed, but that's an excuse, and I don't mean an excuse like you should just do this for every issue, but that is an excuse for you to tell a guest, I do not know. I simply cannot help you. Like, in a lot of cases, we quite literally could not help them with whatever they needed help with. We didn't have as much information or power as front desk concierge. So you would send them over there to them. Like I said, it's not necessarily a bad thing being at the bottom of the totem pole. You can put the responsibility on someone else. And if I can fix someone's problem, if I could, I would do it. 100%. That's the Disney way. You're not supposed to tell people no. Sometimes you quite literally have to in certain cases, but if you can't do it yourself, you're supposed to send them to someone who can, or escalate it to a leader or something along those lines. But yeah, definitely if you feel like you're kind of being looked down on by leadership or whoever, which I'm not saying the leaders mistreated me or anything like that. There were some great leaders there, actually. The most friendly leadership I've had anywhere on property, for sure, above me. But yeah, you can send people to concierge if you can't help them. That is definitely something to do. That's pretty much all I have for this. Like, I'm surprised it went, what are we at now, almost 34 or 35 minutes. I didn't know I had that much extra information. I'm glad I decided to do the second part, but Yeah, if you're here, I'm sure you either got accepted for this role or you're looking to do this role. If you somehow haven't seen part one, I highly suggest you go watch that. As I said then, this really is a great role for certain people. Some people should probably avoid it. And I know you can't always avoid roles, but I think in this case, if you say it's at the bottom of your preference list, you're not going to get it. You'll get, I mean, at very least, attractions or quick service or something. If you just do not want to work at a resort, you can make sure you don't get this, basically. But if you want to work in a resort, I would highly suggest this. I think it's underrated to an extent. Front desk concierge, I know a lot of people really want to do that, which that probably is the most involved you can be in the resort hospitality area. But like I said, it has responsibility, it has extended training. I definitely would have enjoyed doing it, I can say that, but I enjoyed bell services equally as much. But yeah, if you're looking to apply and just looking over roles, good luck to you. I'm sure you'll do great. They actually accept a lot of people now, from what I've heard. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've got. I can't think of anything. Hopefully I don't forget anything and end up having to make a part 3. Not that I had to make this one, I wanted to make it, but may end up forgetting something else. But for now, this is it on Bell Services Dispatcher. I hope the 2 videos have been good for you. And good luck in the rest of your journey. Goodbye.